Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. And I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Estelle Erasmus. Estelle, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Thanks so much, Tom. I'm so happy to be on your programs, plural.
Estelle, as this podcast deals with authors and books, but you bring a different skill level or a different skill, I should say, because you're a writing coach and you help new or experienced authors through the process. So, could I first ask you to tell us a little bit about your professional background that got you to where you are today?
Sure. In the book, I distill my 3 decades of experience as an assigning magazine editor and editor in chief of 5 national consumer publications, as well as my own experience as a widely published journalist and essayist, and somebody who has been teaching at NYU. And I have the 2023 Teaching Excellence Award at NYU, that I teach my students how to do what I do, how to pitch publications, how to craft their essays and their articles, what resources they need to make it the most credible they can, and how to come up with ideas. And so I teach at NYU and also for Writer's Digest, and I do one on one coaching. And I also have a podcast, Freelance Writing Direct, where I talk to authors like Cheryl Strayed and Ann Hood, and assigning editors like from Huffington Post Personal and Wired and Writer's Digest, where I write a lot for. And I also talk to agents and publishers, including my publisher for New World Library, who's the acquiring editor. So they talk about what they're looking for as well. So it's really an education. And my book is for under 20 bucks. You get this education and you get the benefit of my 3 decades of experience on both sides of the publishing wall.
So you really gave a lot of information in that answer. Let me see if I can unpack it a little bit. But let me start with I've worked with editors, so I have some experience in that process. Could you really explain that's a part, but it's only a part? You talked about agents, you talked about publishers, you talked about a wide variety of other people. Could you maybe just walk us through the process for a new or a relatively young author?
So it's 2 different things. One thing is my book focuses more on, like, writing essays, writing articles, but definitely the craft tips can be extrapolated and used if you're writing a book of how to the inciting incident and how to book a reader and all that important stuff. So if somebody wants to write a book, I always say dive in. Information is power, and you really need to learn from the experts, go to conferences, get books like my own, like other books that are really wonderful that talk about the craft, and podcasts like yours, like mine, are great venues to learn from actual authors. And then, of course, always build your craft. And that requires somebody with the expertise who has done it, whether they show you in book form or podcast or webinar or course form, exactly how to do it. And writing that gets noticed became a course at NYU that's going to be running in March, that is towards the journalism certificate for the School of Professional Studies. So really honored and excited about that.
You used a great phrase that I think about and talk about a lot, which is improving your craft. I every time I literally write a blog, I'm conscious that I'm working on my craft, and I've been doing this a long time. Is that something that you find writers are really lifelong learners or lifelong workers on their craft?
Yes, I definitely believe in the premise of lifelong learning. And in fact, NYU has a whole division called lifelong learners. So it's funny that you bring that up, Tom. But I believe that craft can be used in so many different ways. So every time you write a blog post, you're applying craft. What does that mean? Let's break it down. It means that you are opening your blog post into such a way that you're going to hook the reader. So maybe it's the promise of something that they're going to learn that's going to be of service to them. And I talk in my book about service journalism, which is sharing information, tips and tricks and strategies and advice that is gonna help someone's life, and that's really how I honed my teeth when I started in publishing at Woman's World magazine. And so that is something that is important when you're doing a blog post. And I think you realize that because today we're in such an age where noise it is everywhere. You have to break through the noise, whether in your writing or in the way in social media that you're getting someone to pay attention. It's all about getting noticed. And today, the level of attention, I believe people lose attention in 3 seconds, whereas decades ago, it used to be close to 10 15 seconds. And this has been studied in advertising age and with other research tools.
The other thing that really, frankly, motivates me is I think about the debt I owe, and that maybe this is service journalism to someone who's never read me, and that I owe it to them to give it my best effort every time. And if I'm tired or it's late at night or early in the morning and I've missed a deadline or whatever the situation is, it's on me to give it my best for the person who may be my first time reader or maybe a thousand time reader. Is that part of service journalism?
It's showing up for the reader. So when you talk about not missing a deadline or making sure you get the information out there, it's giving the service. So that is part and parcel of it. It's really delivering something that's going to be valuable to your reader. So if you're doing a blog post and maybe you're sharing tidbits from an interview, you want to share some of the most interesting, tantalizing tidbits and make them want to go to find more out about the author or about your interview with the author. If you're talking about something financial, you want to share a few tantalizing tidbits in the post that shows that A, you have the credibility factor there. You know what you're writing about, you know what you're talking about, and that builds trust in the reader with you and with wanting to follow you. And my students follow me. They follow me on social media. They take my courses. They read my book. They follow my webinars. And because they know that I'm going to deliver the information to them that's going to help them elevate themselves in their writing, in their careers, in their blog posts, in their books, in whatever it is that they are doing using the tools and the crafts and the skills that I help teach.
Let me see if I can rephrase that with an anecdote. I once watched a course taught by James Patterson, and he got to the subject of branding. And he said, or the question from the interviewer was, "What is your brand?" And he put out his hand as if he was shaking my hand or the audience's hand. And he said, "This is your brand, your promise. I'm James Patterson. When people pick up one of my books, they expect a thriller. And that's my promise to the audience. Now, I can write a romantic comedy, but I have to communicate that to my audience so that no one wrongly picks up my first rom-com and says, 'This is not a James Patterson book.'" And that really struck me that it's your promise. I thought I heard you say that. Did I
Yes.
get that right? It's your promise?
Yes, I did say that. It's a promise to the reader that you are going to deliver what they need. And it's interesting when you bring up James Patterson, he's somebody who has a big credibility factor behind his name. So much so that he can go ahead and break his own rules now. I believe he partnered with Dolly Parton on a, and he can switch genres if he wanted to, but he has certain aspects that people look for in his books. They know that he's going to deliver an enthralling story or mystery or thriller that's going to take them on a journey. And that's what good writing does. It takes the reader on a journey and it resonates with them. But to be able to do that, there's an author that I love, and her book is decades old. It just shows that good writing and good work and good teaching lasts the decades. Her name is Vivian Gornick, and she wrote a book called The Situation and the Story. And it's the premise of what makes a good essay, because you can talk about the situation, which is the external, which is like a 16-year-old's diary. I went bowling today with the guy I have a crush on, right? That's the external, a little bit internal, talking about the crush. But to make it really interesting, she would need to share a little bit about her internal the emotional implications. When I went with him, I wanted him to notice me. That's why I dressed like that. And when he started flirting with me, my heart turned over because he reminded me of so and the first hero I read in a book or something like that. How you start getting her emotional world, and I'm making this up as we speak, but you're getting insight into the inner workings, and that's what creates a narrative arc. She starts at a certain place, your protagonist starts at a certain place and ends at a different place. And maybe the realization at the end of this bowling thing is that this guy will never notice her no matter what she does, and it's okay. Or maybe she forms a plan to get him to notice her. But there's a transformation in thought, in attitude, and perhaps even in herself. And that goes in a larger way in a book length piece of material. But the same premise can be applied to writing an essay or a first person piece.
For the newbie who wants to get started, what would might be 3 key pieces of advice or whatever you think, they should do other than get off their tail and start writing?
Definitely get off their tail and start writing, Tom. That's the number one, because it could be an idea in your head and just never get on the page, and that's not gonna do anything for you or for your potential readers. I would say start writing short. If you have never written before, try looking at the New York Times has a section in the style section called Tiny Love Stories, which is 100 words and under, like kind of little microcosms of somebody's life. And a lot of my students have broken into A, the New York Times, and B, publishing by writing these stories and getting it published. And there you go. You have a first wonderful clip that you can say you have. And there are many other venues. And I teach writing about micro memoir to my coaching students and also to NYU students. And I would say that is a great way. If you have a memoir in you, you can start sampling it, your little stories that you want to tell. And if you struggle to write it, I would say start with a piece of dialogue that you remember or that you can recreate and write that down. And then write a sentence about what you think happened. And then write another sentence and start building your sentences and putting them together, because the writing part of the brain is a different part of the brain than the editing part. So don't write it as you write, just write it out. Just write. I think it's one of my favorite authors who wrote the book, not Stephen King, but Anne Lamott wrote Write Shitty First Drafts. You pardon my French, but just write it down and then later you can edit it.
My experience was I tried for years to write fiction, never could get it to work, and then I started blogging in a technical legal area, and I discovered I'm an essayist, and I've literally written 25 books that are essentially just long form essays on various business related topics. ho- at what point can a person realize I might not be a fiction writer, but there may be something else I can do, whether it's biography, whether it's memoir, whether it's whatever it may be? Do you help people make that transitional journey?
Yes, I help people figure out what is most compelling to them to put on paper. And I love you say that even though you're writing about compliance and you're writing about business issues, you're really, Tom, a storyteller. And that's what writing is about. And by the way, I've interviewed top CEOs of business, and a lot of them say when they are trying to get to their market, when they are trying to get attention for their product, They tell stories because stories from back in the cave days when we all sat around the campfire and people shared their experiences even before writing happened. This is what is the universal human experience. So when you tell a story and you connect it to business, A, it resonates with the reader because they feel the humanity of what you're going through. And a lot of times people tell the stories of their mistakes. There are some businesses that are on social media and they have a following and they tell like what happened when the factory ran out of the important ingredient that they needed and they had to source it somewhere else. And that gets the audience, and they've done studies that show when your emotions are evoked. And I talk about this in my book also, because I'm big on studies that support the premises that and the tenets I'm talking about. And so when your emotions are evoked by reading something, it makes you pay attention even more, and it makes you feel more aligned with the writer who's writing the story that you're reading. So you're really onto something. By the way, you could write memoir because if you're writing stories from your life, that really is memoir. And my advice to you would be to explore the short form of micro memoir and start there and see where you can go with it before you attack a big book. But the other thing is you have all that material in your blogs, Tom, that you can then take and parse it out into different chapters and then put the material as breakdown chapter form and then figure out what you're missing, the transitional paragraphs, the other things that you want to include in your book, and of course, include what your journey is, where you started, where you ended up, or where you plan to end up, because that's the progression of a memoir.
Estelle, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted any more information on yourself, your services, or really any of the topics we've touched on, what might be the best place or places for them to go,
Of
including
course,
your book?
my book is Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published. And you could find information. It's on Amazon, it's on Bookshop, it's on IndieBound, Barnes and Noble, but everywhere books are sold. But you can go to my website at Estelle, S as in Sam, Erasmus.com. And there you will find information. You will find links to my podcast where you can see it on YouTube or listen on iTunes and little backstories. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you will get a pitching guide, a free pitching guide sharing tons of information. And I also am on social media everywhere, TikTok, Instagram, X/Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And I have a Substack that offers craft advice. And for my paid subscribers, I give special bonus clips and I'll also analyze their pitches. And I'm going to analyze the first parts of people's essays. So you want to check that out at estelleserasmus.substack.com.
I have to tell you, I have never done this before, but I'm going to give a recommendation for everyone to buy this book now. While she was telling us where to go, I just bought a copy on Amazon. I did that for a reason, though, because we're going to both be at a conference next week. So I'm going to get her to sign it for me. But this has been a great episode. I hope some or all of our listeners will contact you. For those listening on the video, excuse me, on the audio, you're really missing the passion that Estelle brings to this. I'm seeing her because we record this video for Facebook, but she absolutely loves doing this. She loves helping people, and she will bring a level of professionalism with passion to your project that will certainly jumpstart you. So, Estelle, I'm greatly looking forward to meeting you next week at Podfest Expo. And thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me on this podcast.
Same. Thank you so much, Tom. I can't wait to meet you, and I'm so happy to be speaking to you here, and I loved our conversation. Thank you.